What sort of effect is Jorge Prado going to have on the riders market heading into 2025? Welcome back to Vital MX. I'm your host, Michael Lindsay. And as with any of our news break or silly season or rumor mill features, these are brought to you by our friends at Yoshimura R&D of America. Check them out at yoshimura-rd.com. Yeah, it's a little early to be talking silly season, but is it ever really too early? There's always room for speculation, and in this case, a little bit of speculation / some very real conversation. Jorge Prado has officially ended his U.S. Supercross adventure for the year. It was originally only supposed to be the first 3 rounds of the Monster Energy AMA Supercross Championship, but he was able to extend that out to 4 rounds, finishing out with the Anaheim 2 and a Triple Crown format. Jorge's overall experience was quite enjoyable to watch. Speaking from my standpoint in the media, very enjoyable to talk to. I think his impact with fans, based on the comments, interviews, he definitely made a splash during his time here, increased his fan base, and has really made some people wonder what he is going to do come 2025. And that's what we're going to talk about today, because he is already having a little bit of an effect on the rider market, and we'll get into some of the options that are available to him and also some of the other 450 contracts at play. There aren't that many, as you probably noticed last year. The majority of the big names in the sport re-upped on 2-year contracts and a couple on 1 years, which again, we'll get into. Now, speaking of Prado, a lot of this is going to be based off of the thought of him coming to the U.S. full-time in 2025. And from my position personally, I really believe that is what he's going to end up doing. I very highly doubt that he is going to stay in MXGP past this season. His experience seemed to go well, so again. But let's talk about that first a little bit. What in a rider of his situation is there to gain to come to the U.S. to race versus sticking it out in MXGP? So I'm going to start mostly with the big draw, financials. Yes, he is one of the top paid riders in MXGP, but there's still a few things restrictive there. Some of the best riders over there have salaries similar to the top riders here. However, some of the highest salaries we've heard here are still better than in MXGP. But then we get down to race performances, bonuses, and even gear deals. Their season as a whole is typically around 10 races shorter than ours, so it's 10 less races that they can make money at. We have purse money, they do not, and now we have the Super Motocross World Championship, which has a very large purse for those final 3 races, plus that championship pot. Those are all things that would be enticing to Jorge Prado. Other than that, with his actual team contract, say he wins an MXGP, he gets a bonus from that from the OEM. Again, there is no purse money. However, from some very good sources we've heard recently, including a rider who wins MXGPs and mentioned it about his contract, their bonuses there are almost a third of what apparently our riders make here in Supercross and in Pro Motocross. So again, for every race win they could pull off here, it's about 3 times the amount of money if what we heard was true. And again, we usually have bonuses for second and third. On top of that, somebody like Jorge Prado is only able to do a helmet and goggle deal. His aero deal and his Scott deal are his own, but his gear deal with Thor and his boot deal with CD are tied to his team, the DeCarli Gas Red Bull Factory racing operation over there. And that's pretty common for most MXGP teams because they're almost all privately owned. You have the KTM effort itself is owned by the OEM. Every other team is owned by an individual that is then linked with a factory. Even if it looks like a factory effort, it's still a private operation with heavy factory backing. Your Yamaha teams like that, the Kawasaki team, Honda, Husqvarna, Gas, etc. And almost all those teams have gear deals tied up to the riders where at most they can do a goggle and maybe a helmet deal. Actually, the factory Kawasaki team that is run by Ice One Racing this year with Jeremy Seward and Roman Fevra is really the first factory team there in a long time that is letting their guys do true head-to-toe deals. So again, for someone like Jorge coming here on a team that would allow him to do head-to-toe deals, even bigger possibility there of making contract money off that, and those deals can pay bonuses for races and championship bonuses as well. Jorge Prado is at the end of his contract this year, so it is not a guarantee that he will just come to the U.S. with Gas or somewhere in the Austrian trio. He does have options. Coming into last year, he was out of contract and signed a 1-year extension for 2024, and kind of part of that deal was even to get this tryout to race Supercross this year. Now, he needs to make a decision fairly soon for a couple of reasons. One, you always want to strike while iron is hot. The interest in Prado is high at the moment. There is interest from teams and sponsors and different people to see if he wants to make the move. And for him himself, he's going to want to know what he's doing quite soon instead of dragging it out. Really, yes, he could go defend his MXGP title this year, and he may, but that's really probably not going to actually affect his market value for the US that much. So better to get it done now rather than later. So again, even he mentioned before he left that he needs to make a decision pretty soon. So let's start with the obvious. Would he just come over for gas? That is a possibility, but I lean towards it being less likely, and I'll explain why. If he comes over here for gas, he will have to ride for the Troy Lee Designs Red Bull Gas racing team, which sure he did in Supercross, but sort of as a guest. He was allowed to keep all of his sponsors on his gear that come from his team in Europe, but if he were to come here full time, that would not be the case. He would have to wear TLD gear, helmet, Oakley goggles, Alpinestars boots. Those are tied to team. That's a team deal. So like even Justin Barcia doesn't get paid separately for those. The TLD team is also one of the only privately owned factory teams in the US where in KTM's group, KTM and Husky are owned by the OEM, but the TLD team is owned by Troy Lee. There's a little bit difference in budget there. The personnel is not truly working for KTM. They're still privately contracted through the team. There's some difference in resources and financials there. And just based on the way KTM works, that's kind of the team that they probably have the least amount of money into. To make it maybe really worth Prado's time, somebody's going to have to step up. Sure, Troy could go, okay, it's a 450 guy. I'll put in some more because gear deals, but he's already paying for a lot for the whole team and for Barcia, who just re-upped on a 2-year contract. It would make sense, though, to have finally 2 450 riders of the brand, but the cost of Barcia just re-upping for 2 years plus what Prado is probably going to need or be looking for really leans me towards not as likely. Where I think if he is to stay inside the Austrian fold is he would move back to KTM. Now remember, he was a Red Bull KTM rider through 85s, EMX, his MX2 titles, and just recently got moved when the Dakar team he was riding for on KTM's got moved over to Gas. Yes, Gas is a Spanish brand. You would think they would want to keep a Spanish rider on it. However, that seems, in my opinion, that means a little less in the US market. Over in Europe, KTM has seemed to take an approach where KTM, Husky, and Gas are treated a little bit more evenly across their factory operations, where here in the US, there's still a little bit of a pecking order. Red Bull KTM definitely has the largest budget of the group, the most personnel, the most senior personnel, and is treated as the top dog. The Rockstar Husky team is just a tick below that, and then probably the TLD Gas team just a little bit below that. So again, if we're playing hierarchy here, in the past, things like engine updates, new suspension components have usually gone to KTM first. It definitely has gotten better the last couple years, but there's still some hints of that. So what would it require to move Jorge Prado back to KTM? First off, Chase Sexton is there on, we believe, a 2-year contract with a 3rd-year option, or it's just a straight 3-year deal. So Chase Sexton is set, while Aaron Plessinger only is on a 1-year extension. So depending on budgets, KTM could move Aaron to either TLD or Husky, which we'll get into in a minute, or maybe even choose to let him walk if they really feel that strongly about moving that budget to Jorge Prado. Or Red Bull and KTM could just come together and say, you know what, screw the synergy of 2 and 2, let's run all 3 of these guys here. Because, of course, Aaron Plessinger just won his first 450 Supercross. He is riding some of the best he ever has in Supercross in his whole career. And on top of that, the fan base for Aaron is huge at the moment. He grows just more popular every year. So if they can make the budget work, having all 3 of them there would be a positive. In KTM, or I should say PR Mobility, the parent company's case, they would already have to give a chunk of money to TLD to help pay for his contract. What if they just paid that internally at KTM, where Prado would be allowed to do all of his own head-to-toe gear deals? That's more financially advantageous for Prado to be able to sign, again, keep his Scott deal, keep his Aero deal. He could either do a personal Thor deal or go out for a different gear brand, and keep his boot deals. I mean, gear for him, you have riders in the US that are getting paid basically about $1 million, some of the top dogs for gear companies. Some of them are over 500 grand. Why can't Prado get 300,000 or 400,000 for gear? He's got worldwide appeal, US appeal. Then there's also win bonuses and championship bonuses tied to that gear deal, that helmet deal, that goggle deal. It would all add up. Prado could easily get over $500,000 all in with those deals, and Red Bull could choose to pay him separately. Again, US side, that's how they do that sometimes. Yes, it's a team sponsor, but they could do an individual deal with him. That can make it the most financially beneficial. Before we move on outside the Austrian trio, I will touch on the Rockstar Energy Husqvarna team because they also have a rider out of contract. Christian Craig's contract is done at the end of the year, while Malcolm Stewart just signed a new 2-year contract. So he's good for 2024 and 2025. So that's another one. Maybe they could put Prado at Husky. Again, I don't think the Rockstar, if you're Prado, I don't think you leave Red Bull for Rockstar of your energy drink choices. Rockstar has just signed on a 2-year extension with that team. Since Pepsi bought Rockstar, they have really not focused on branding it outside the US anymore. So you don't really have that appeal with Jorge Prado in the Spanish market. Rockstar's not going to push heavy there. If anything, if we had to do movement, I would say if you're Rockstar and Husky, it would be more interest. Hey, if we could take Aaron's so marketable here in the US, Rockstar brand, that could be a really good move if they decided they needed to make some free budget, some free space over at KTM. Again, that's what could potentially happen because I'll just straight say it, at Christian Craig's current performance levels, there is a possibility that he may not be at that team next year. So they may need somebody to fill a spot. Maybe RJ Hampshire moves up early, but Christian Craig is definitely one to watch for as, again, his contract is up. Aaron Plessinger's is up. Malcolm Stewart, new 2-year deal. Barsha, new 2-year deal. Sexton on a 2-year deal, probably with an option. So those guys are all saved. Moving over into the Japanese options. Let's just kill the first one. Team HRC Honda. That's the Lawrence zone. Hunter Jet, multi-year deals. There's no budget there. It's not happening. You're not going to see Prado on Honda. Let's just put it bluntly there. That's not even in the realm of possibility at the moment. The one that I think is very likely, I mentioned this on one of our post-race podcasts a couple weeks ago, just kind of thinking about market options, is I said Monster Energy Kawasaki because of Adam Ciancerella's contract being up. Well, by the time we arrived at Anaheim 2, that buzz is actually floating around the pits, and it sounds like the team may have actually already made contact with Prado. That seems to be the strongest non-Austrian rumor at the moment of interest for Jorge Prado. Well, that's a Monster Energy team. From longtime rumors we've heard is Monster Energy is extremely interested in Jorge Prado. Again, the Spanish market, when it comes to motorsports, you have guys like Danny Pedrosa, Marc Marquez, Fernando Alonso in F1, Carlos Sainz, even Ruben Fernandez, MXGP. Spain is a motorsports, it's a big thing, kind of like Italy and France. Like, it's a good market. Prado has worldwide appeal. Monster, from what we, again, have heard, have really wanted for a long time. So they definitely could inject some cash in there to try to make this Cowie deal happen. Or even, hey, it's still a team deal, but again, do a separate deal with him to add in some more straight cash, some bonuses, some things of that nature to make it financially good. And again, Cowie, you can do your own head-to-toe gear deal. Jason Anderson has just re-upped there for 2 years, so he's good for this year, 24 and 25. But again, Adam Ciancerella's deal is up at the end of this year. At this point, I don't think it's a question if Adam Ciancerella wants to continue or not. That is up to Adam. I think the question is, does Kawasaki want to continue on with Adam? He's a great brand ambassador. Everybody loves him. We love interviewing him. His attitude, what he brings to the sport, his outlook on life. It's hard not to be an Adam Ciancerella fan. But just straight up, it's been a rough road. It's starting out this year rough. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, and it might be time for Kawasaki to move on. Most notably, they don't really have 250 riders in position. Faulkner could finally come of age and win a title this year, but would you really move him up after all the years of injuries he's had? Would you want to give him another year in 250s to defend? I would think so. Catching everybody else there is so young. Cowie needs some options. They have an all-new bike now. It's time for them to push, to market, to spend some money, to be aggressive. I think the most likely Japanese option at this point, again, is Monster Energy Kawasaki. While we have Monster Energy in the conversation again with their interests, you can also not count out the Yamaha Star Racing squad. However, there are some more difficulties there. They have Cooper Webb on a 3-year contract, 2-year with an option. Justin Cooper on a 1-year deal. But as he mentioned on our MotoX Pod show last week, he has set guidelines in his contract that if he meets certain results, he automatically gets re-upped. He's good to go. The question mark is Eli Tomac. Eli can kind of do whatever he wants. He's Supercross only this year. He could choose to race outdoors if he wants to. He could choose to race SMX. For where we already think Yamaha's also laid out some options for next year. But it's up to Eli if he wants to take those. Again, I think Jorge Prado needs to strike while the iron's hot and make his decision. I don't know if he can wait out what Eli's going to do or if Justin Cooper is going to make those target marks for his contract. So it is a possibility. It's not, it's not impossible, but there's a few too many roadblocks there to make sense of that going through in any timely manner. Moving on to some of the other OEMs. What about a Hep Suzuki? Ken Roczen is only on a 1-year extension there. However, the team's very built around Kenny, operating out of Sandbox in Florida for him. The team's got fly deal other than Kenny. I don't think that would be Prado's first choice. Suzuki hasn't put out set plan to update their bike. It works for Kenny. Kenny had affiliation with Suzuki, had a want to be there. I don't think Hep's a serious option. An option that our my co-editor, Lewis Phillips, kind of threw out there that is interesting is what if Ducati wanted him? Again, the Monster connection's there. Ducati would have to convince him to stay in MXGP for one more year. Again, Ducati is going to go full-time MXGP racing in 2025, and they will not be in the US due to homologation reasons, because they won't even have a production bike till late 25. So they will not race in the US till 2026. So they'd have to convince Prado to stay in MXGP for one more year. And that might be a tough sell for a rider who's already, while he's still very young, a little old to be making the move to the US full time. Time's ticking. He can't even do a couple rounds like he did this year if he were to go to Ducati next year. So it's not out of the question. Who knows? But that's another one. What about Triumph? They do have a 450 coming next year, but things have been quiet as the 250 has kind of been drug out and getting unveiled, getting racing. No energy drinks there for 450s, possibly no gear deals. But if you're Prado, would you want to link up with an unproven manufacturer for your US Supercross debut or work with somebody established? That kind of puts the possibility, I think, of a Triumph one kind of never say never, but also not a very good chance of happening. And then Beta USA, I don't think the equipment's there. The budget's not there. Again, just not in the conversation. Any private team below that, I just don't think has the funds to make it happen. Now, in saying the funds, I do think Prado might actually have to take a pay cut to come to the US, again, when it comes to salary. He's very high paid in MXGP. While he was impressive here, still a US team is going to have to sort of look at him as maybe a little bit more of a long-term project. He'll be great in outdoors. He will not be a Supercross title contender his first year, but for what he gets paid over there, that's what you would expect of him in the US for that kind of same pay level. He may have to take a little bit of a salary cut, but again, it will be made up by far in gear deal options and other things that would be available to him on most of these US Supercross and motocross teams. And again, I think it's interesting because Jorge Prado originally looked like he was going to make a U.S. move much earlier. I got to witness him here in California when I believe he was 14 years old, and he did over a month of Supercross testing with TLD. And when he left, I remember here at that time, he's going to go do pretty much a year GPs and come back. And as he's mentioned some interviews, things changed. He was competitive, won his MX2 World titles, won his MXGP title. But in talking to him, it's not that he doesn't seem interested in racing MXGP. It just seems he's interested in a new challenge, and Supercross definitely seems to click with him. His enjoyment factor here was high. I think he wants the new challenge, and again, that's why I lean towards him really making the move. It went fairly well. There have been people that have thought it's gone better than expected. I've also seen some industry or other riders that thought they actually thought he was maybe a little underwhelming for his status. I personally thought it went pretty well. I'm definitely very interested to see him here. Again, kind of Spanish motorsports in general, there are some big players, and I think it would be really cool to have Prado on. And this is not to debate MXGP versus Supercross, but really the largest stage of our sport. US Supercross is still that in terms of viewers, in terms of social media. Prado's post about racing US Supercross got more likes, comments, views, interactions by far than any of his MXGP posts from last year, winning the world title, etc. It's a very simple fact where the money is, where the eyeballs are at. You can argue the prestige of the titles as much as you want, world versus Supercross. I'm not going to argue that. I'm going to argue the money, the challenge, the people, the eyeballs, etc. It is US Supercross still that is the biggest stage in that sense. And if Jorge Prado really wants to kind of do the hat trick and show he truly is a rider with a wide range of talents, it would be a big challenge for him to come here. And if he can pull it off in the next couple years and potentially win a 450 Supercross title, it definitely would be a unique one record book wise to have somebody come over already in the premier class. Yes, we've had riders come over from Europe and MX2 and be successful on 250s and eventually successful in 450s, but it is very, very rare that anyone has made the move in big bikes like he has. Yes, we had guys like Greg Albertine, Sebastian Tortelli, but it's been a long time since somebody has made that move and has done it successfully. So again, it would be a unique challenge. And for anybody that's wondering, yes, he came over on a 450 because he's won an MXGP world title. There's actually a clause in our rules. He cannot ride a 250 here. He has to ride a 450 when he comes. So that's our little bit of our silly season for now. Again, a lot of your big names were locked down again last year on 2-year deals, if not more. Your big interest is, like I said, this year will be, where does Aaron Plessinger go? What happens with Christian Craig, Adam Cianciarulo? Does Eli Tomac continue on? Eli kind of controls his own fate. I really think the other riders mentioned, though, they're going to be waiting on Prado to make his decision. I think teams are going to wait to see what he wants to do. So at the moment, for kind of some of these 450 spots, I really think the Jorge Prado is the gatekeeper per se. He's got to make the move first, and then some dominoes will fall. And what is interesting is we will probably hear fairly soon, at least on a rumor standpoint, of what he decides. But as with our sport and its ungodly secrecy, unlike MotoGP or F1 where they can announce deals a year out, they won't announce it. It'll drag out till the official word will drag out to the end of Jorge's current deal. So this will be a talking point the rest of the season. At some point, we'll say we think we know for sure where he's going, but it will be a long time before we actually get final confirmation on Prado's home for 2025. If you have any questions, thoughts, or your own theories, throw them in the comments section below. And if you like these features, please give us a like, subscribe, and thanks for watching.